Mary, a curious and headstrong teenager, lived in a small village nestled between towering mountains. Isolated from the world, the village clung to its traditions, bound by a sense of duty and an unshakable routine. Mary, however, felt trapped. She was spirited and yearned to explore the world beyond the mountains, but her mother, Caroline, kept her close, grooming her to be the next village healer. Caroline was respected but distant, always preoccupied with tending to the villagers' ailment. Mary admired her mother's skill, but resented the heavy expectations placed on her. Their relationship was strained. Mary felt suffocated by the weight of the village's needs, while Caroline believed Mary was neglecting her destiny. Each day, the tension grew as Mary's desire for freedom clashed with the duties she was expected to inherit. One cold evening, the village was thrown into chaos. When Caroline was found dead in her herb-filled cottage, her body lay still, her face pale and lips tinged with an unnatural hue. Whispers spread through the village like wildfire poison. They murmured, someone had killed the healer. Mary, the last person to have seen Caroline alive, was immediately under suspicion. The two had been heard arguing earlier that day, and some villagers claimed to have seen Mary leaving her mother's cottage just before Caroline's death. Fear and mistrust swirled in the air, and soon, the villagers began to believe that Mary had something to do with her mother's mysterious death. Grief-stricken and bewildered, Mary denied it, but doubt began to creep into her own mind. Had she unknowingly been involved? The village council convened, demanding answers, despite her pleas of innocence. The villagers, already on edge, wanted someone to blame. As Mary stood before them, fear clawed at her heart. She had never felt so alone. Her protests were met with cold stares, and in the end, the council convicted her, claiming the evidence, however circumstantial, was enough. But rather than face execution, Mary was sentenced to exile. The council believed that banishment, with the unforgiving wilderness beyond the village, would be a fate far worse than death. On the day of her exile, Mary was forced to walk through the village. The air felt colder outside the village, and Mary's heart raced with fear. The weight of her mother's death, the accusation of murder, and the uncertainty of her future pressed down on her like a stone. As she turned her back on the only home she had ever known, she felt like a ghost, lost, unwanted, and condemned to face the unknown. Alone in the wilderness, Mary's first nights were filled with terror. Every rustle of leaves, every snap of a twig, sent shivers down her spine. She wandered aimlessly, her mind clouded with grief, fear, and despair. The weight of her exile threatened to crush her spirit, and for days she moved in a haze, barely surviving. But as hunger gnawed at her and her body weakened, Mary's mind turned to the teachings her mother had instilled in her. Though their relationship had been strained, Caroline had always taught her about herbs and healing, about surviving in the wild. Slowly, Mary began to rely on those lessons. She found medicinal plants, built shelters, and learned to make fire. Bit by bit, her fear turned to resilience. She still grieved her mother, still felt the pain of betrayal, but survival became her focus. As the days passed, Mary grew stronger, both in body and spirit. The wilderness was no longer her enemy but her refuge. Her mother's wisdom lived on through her hands, guiding her through the darkest moments. Months turned into years as Mary wandered the wilds, moving farther from her old life. Along the way, she encountered travelers, nomads, traders, and distant tribes who roamed lands she had never imagined. At first, they viewed her with suspicion, but her knowledge of healing and herbs soon earned her a place among them. Mary's skills as a healer blossomed. She mended wounds, cured illnesses, and even saved lives, earning the trust and respect of those she met. With each encounter, her reputation grew, and she transformed from a frightened, exiled girl into a powerful woman, a healer of unmatched skill and wisdom. Yet, even as she grew in strength, the memory of her mother's death and her village's betrayal lingered. The pain, though dulled by time, still lived in her heart. But Mary pushed forward, determined to make a new life, one where she was not bound by the expectations of others. Years later, Mary found herself in a distant land, surrounded by those who had been lost or forgotten, people exiled, abandoned, or cast aside by society, just as she had once been. Moved by their plight, Mary began to build something new, a sanctuary. It was a place where the unwanted could find refuge, where the forgotten could be healed. The sanctuary grew, a testament to her resilience and compassion. Her healing skills became legendary, and people traveled far and wide to seek her help. Mary had created a community, a haven for the lost, just as she had once been. But despite her new life, the pain of her mother's death and the mystery of her exile haunted her. One day, a deadly plague swept through the land, threatening to destroy everything she had built. Drawing on all of her mother's teachings and her own hard-won wisdom, Mary worked tirelessly to find a cure. As she mixed herbs late into the night, memories of her mother filled her mind. It was as if Caroline's spirit was guiding her once more. In the end, Mary succeeded in saving her people, her sanctuary spared from destruction. But even as she stood victorious, the questions of her past remained unanswered. She had built a new life, a new identity, but the ghost of her mother's death still lingered, waiting for the truth to be uncovered.